The wheelchair sat like an island in a sea of empty chairs. Christopher Bennett stared at the 3 vacant seats beside him, each one a reminder of what money could never buy. Around him, hundreds of Harvard Business School graduates embraced their families, their laughter cutting through him like glass. His fingers gripped the armrests of his custom wheelchair, the same hands that had signed billion-dollar deals now trembling with loneliness. 3 years ago, a drunk driver had stolen more than just his legs. The accident had taken his fiancée, his best friend, and somehow, everyone else had slowly drifted away too. His company, Bennett Industries, thrived under his remote leadership. His bank account swelled with each passing quarter. Yet here he sat, the richest man in his graduating class, completely and utterly alone. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of Harvard's Sanders Theater, casting long shadows across the packed auditorium. Christopher had fought tooth and nail to complete his MBA despite his condition. He'd attended every lecture, submitted every assignment, proven that his mind remained as sharp as ever. But victory felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from business associates and board members. Polite words from people who saw him as an investment opportunity, not a human being. He turned the device face down and watched a young woman nearby burst into tears of joy as her entire extended family cheered her name. The dean's voice echoed through the speakers, calling graduates to the stage. Christopher's turn would come soon. He'd roll across that platform, shake hands with professors, and collect his diploma while cameras flashed. Then he'd go home to his empty penthouse, add the frame to his wall of achievements, and continue his isolated existence. A little girl's giggle cut through his dark thoughts. Somewhere in the crowd, a child was laughing with pure, innocent joy. The sound made his chest tighten. He'd wanted children once. Had planned a future full of family dinners and bedtime stories. Now those dreams felt as distant as the stars. Christopher closed his eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. His therapist said trauma could make people build walls, but his felt more like a fortress. Impenetrable. Necessary. Safe. The applause around him grew louder as another graduate crossed the stage. Christopher opened his eyes and straightened his shoulders. He'd gotten this far by being strong, by refusing to let anyone see weakness. Today would be no different. But as he sat in his wheelchair, surrounded by empty chairs and other people's joy, Christopher Bennett had never felt more broken. The billions in his account meant nothing. The business empire he'd built felt meaningless. Success, he'd learned the hard way, was worthless without someone to share it with. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years proving his worth, showing the world that his disability didn't define him. Yet here he was, defined entirely by what he lacked. Love. Family. Connection. His name would be called soon. He'd smile for the cameras, accept congratulations, and maintain the facade that everything was fine. Because that's what successful people did. They persevered. They overcame. They never let anyone see them break. But inside his perfectly pressed suit and behind his composed expression, Christopher Bennett was drowning in loneliness so deep it took his breath away. Are you rooting for Christopher already? Do you believe everyone deserves love, no matter their circumstances? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And please subscribe to see how this story unfolds, because what happens next will restore your faith in unexpected connections. Simone Washington rushed through the parking lot, her 5-year-old daughter Amara's hand firmly clasped in hers. They were running late for her sister's graduation, and Simone's nursing shift at Boston General had run longer than expected. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair hastily pulled back, but she'd promised Kiana she'd be there. "Mommy, why are we running?" Amara asked, her little legs working double time to keep up. "Because Aunt Kiana is graduating today, baby girl. This is a very special day for our family." Simone had worked extra shifts for months to pay for the cap and gown, the graduation photos, and the small celebration dinner afterward. As a single mother, every dollar mattered. But seeing her younger sister become the first Washington to earn a master's degree was worth every sacrifice. They slipped into the back of Sanders Theater just as the ceremony began. Simone scanned the crowd, looking for available seats. Most families had claimed entire rows, their balloons and flowers marking their territory. She spotted a section with more space and began making her way over, Amara skipping beside her. "Mommy, look at that man," Amara whispered, pointing toward the front section. Simone followed her daughter's gaze and felt her heart squeeze. A man in a wheelchair sat alone, surrounded by empty chairs. His shoulders were straight, his jaw set with determination, but something in his posture spoke of deep sadness. He looked successful, wealthy even, with his expensive suit and perfectly styled dark hair. But wealth, Simone knew from her years as a nurse, couldn't heal every wound. Why is he sitting by himself? Amara asked with the innocent curiosity only children possessed. I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes people don't have family who can come. That's sad. It was sad. Simone had seen loneliness in the hospital, watched patients with no visitors, no hands to hold during difficult procedures. This man's isolation reminded her of those moments when human connection mattered most. They found seats several rows behind him. Simone pulled out her phone to record when Kiana's name was called, but her attention kept drifting to the solitary figure ahead. During her nursing training, she'd learned to read people, to see past surfaces to the pain beneath. This man was hurting in ways that had nothing to do with his wheelchair. Can we sit with him? Amara asked suddenly. Oh no, baby. We don't know him. We can't just walk up to strangers. But even as she said it, Simone felt drawn to help. Her mother had raised her to be kind, to reach out when others needed support. It's what made her a good nurse. It's also what had gotten her heart broken by Amara's father, who'd left when he realized single parenthood wasn't the adventure he'd signed up for. The dean called another name, and the graduate bounded across the stage to thunderous applause from what seemed like half the auditorium. The contrast was stark. When this man's turn came, would anyone cheer for him? Simone glanced at Amara, who was still watching the man with concern. Her daughter had inherited her compassionate heart, always wanting to help hurt animals, sharing her lunch with classmates who forgot theirs, bringing flowers to elderly neighbors. Maybe Amara's instincts were right. He looks lonely, Mommy. I know, sweetheart. Can we go say hi? Just to be nice. Simone wrestled with the decision. She'd taught Amara to be cautious around strangers, but she'd also taught her to be kind. The man looked successful, surrounded by expensive technology and wearing clothes that cost more than Simone made in a month. He probably wouldn't want to be bothered by a woman in scrubs and a chattering 5-year-old. But as she watched him sit alone while family after family celebrated around him, her nurse's instincts kicked in. Everyone needed connection. Everyone deserved to feel seen. What if he says no? Simone asked. Then at least we tried, Amara said with the wisdom that sometimes came from children. Simone looked at her daughter's earnest face, then back at the man's rigid shoulders. Her own parents had died in a car accident when Amara was 2, leaving Simone to navigate single motherhood without their support. She understood loneliness, understood how pride could keep people isolated when they needed help most. Okay, she said softly. But if he wants to be alone, we respect that. Amara nodded solemnly, already planning her approach with the seriousness of a 5-year-old on a mission. Before Simone could change her mind, Amara had slipped from her seat and was walking down the aisle with the confidence only children possessed. Simone hurried after her, heart pounding as her daughter approached the stranger. Hi, Amara said simply, appearing beside his wheelchair. I'm Amara. What's your name? Christopher startled, looking down at the little girl with wide eyes. Up close, Simone could see he was younger than she'd thought, maybe early 30s with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm sorry, Simone rushed to say, reaching for Amara's hand. She just noticed you sitting alone and wanted to say hello. We don't mean to bother you. It's fine, Christopher said quietly, his voice deeper than she'd expected. Hi, Amara. I'm Christopher. Why are you in a wheelchair? Amara asked with typical 5-year-old directness. Amara, Simone scolded gently. That's not polite to ask. But Christopher managed a small smile. My legs don't work anymore. I was in an accident a few years ago. Does it hurt? Not anymore. Are you here for the graduation? My Aunt Kiana is graduating. She's really smart. Are you graduating too? I am. Where's your family? The question hung in the air. Christopher's smile faded, and Simone saw pain flicker across his features. They couldn't make it, he said simply. Amara studied his face with the intensity children reserved for important matters. Then she looked at the empty chairs beside him and back at Simone. Mommy, can we sit with Christopher so he's not alone? Simone felt her cheeks warm. Sweetheart, Mr. She realized she didn't know his last name. Bennett? Christopher Bennett. Mr. Bennett might prefer to watch the ceremony quietly. But Christopher was looking at Amara with something that might have been wonder. Actually, I'd like the company. If you don't mind sitting with a stranger. You're not a stranger, Amara declared. You're Christopher. And strangers don't have names. Despite everything, Christopher laughed. The sound was rusty, like he hadn't used it in a while, but genuine. Simone felt her protective instincts war with her compassionate ones. Something about this man seemed safe, familiar even. Maybe it was the way he spoke gently to Amara, or how his eyes softened when her daughter smiled at him. "Are you sure?" she asked. "We don't want to intrude." "Please," he said, and there was something in that single word that made her decision. They settled into the empty chairs beside him. Amara immediately began chattering about her aunt, her kindergarten class, and her favorite color, which changed daily but was currently purple. Christopher listened with genuine attention, asking questions that showed he was really hearing her. When Kiana's name was called, Simone jumped to her feet, cheering loudly while recording on her phone. She noticed Christopher applauding too, smiling as he watched her sister cross the stage. "She looks like you," he commented when Simone sat back down. "Everyone says that. Same stubborn chin." "I can see that," he said, glancing at Amara, who was indeed sporting the Washington family's determined jawline. As the ceremony continued, Simone found herself stealing glances at Christopher. There was something about him that intrigued her. Not just his obvious wealth or his quiet dignity, but the way he seemed to come alive around Amara. Her daughter had that effect on people, but this felt different. Like he was remembering how to be happy. When his name was called, Christopher Bennett, Master of Business Administration, Simone and Amara cheered as loudly as any family. His surprise was evident as he looked back at them from the stage, and for the first time since they'd met him, he looked truly grateful. "We did good, Mommy," Amara whispered as Christopher returned to his seat, diploma in hand. "Yes, baby girl. We did good." After the ceremony, families flowed toward the exits in celebration. Simone gathered her purse and reached for Amara's hand, but her daughter was engaged in animated conversation with Christopher about the differences between wheelchairs and roller coasters. "They both have wheels, but one goes really fast and the other one you control yourself," Amara was explaining with 5-year-old logic. "That's a very good observation," Christopher said seriously. "I never thought of it that way." Simone smiled despite herself. Her daughter had a gift for making people feel heard. Something Simone had learned was precious in a world where everyone seemed too busy to really listen. "We should let you go celebrate," Simone said, standing. "Congratulations on your graduation." "Thank you." Christopher hesitated, then looked up at her. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to get dinner. To celebrate. My treat." The invitation caught her off guard. Simone's instinct was to politely decline. She'd learned to be careful about accepting help from men, especially ones who clearly had money. But something in Christopher's expression stopped her. "Please," he added quietly. "It's been a long time since I've had anyone to celebrate with." Amara tugged on Simone's scrubs. "Can we, Mommy? I'm hungry," and Christopher looked sad again. Out of the mouths of babes. Simone studied Christopher's face and saw her daughter was right. The light that had appeared during their conversation was dimming, replaced by that earlier loneliness. "That's very kind of you," she began. "I know a place nearby that's family-friendly," Christopher said quickly. "Nothing fancy. Just good food and conversation." Simone felt her resolve wavering. When was the last time someone had offered to take her to dinner? When had she last had an adult conversation that didn't revolve around work schedules or parent-teacher conferences? "I'm not really dressed for dinner out," she said, gesturing to her wrinkled scrubs. "You look perfect," Christopher said, and meant it. "Besides, I'm not exactly formal either." It was true. Despite his expensive clothes, there was something approachable about him. Maybe it was how he'd listened to Amara, or how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Please, Mommy? I want to eat with Christopher." Simone looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Christopher's cautious one. Her mother had always said that sometimes the best things in life came from saying yes to unexpected opportunities. "Okay," she said. "But somewhere casual." Amara gets excited in restaurants. "I know the perfect place," Christopher said, his whole face lighting up. "Do you like pizza?" "I love pizza," Amara announced. "Especially with extra cheese. A girl after my own heart." They made their way through the thinning crowd, Simone pushing Christopher's wheelchair when he offered to let her, something that felt natural rather than awkward. Outside, she expected him to call for a driver or point toward an expensive car. Instead, he led them to a modified van with a wheelchair lift. "I can drive," he explained, seeing her surprise. "One of the first things I learned after the accident. Independence was important to me." Simone helped Amara into the back seat while Christopher transferred himself to the driver's seat with practiced efficiency. She found herself impressed by his matter-of-fact approach to his disability. No self-pity, no dramatic explanations. Just adaptation and moving forward. The restaurant he chose was a small family pizza place near campus, nothing fancy but clean and welcoming. The owner greeted Christopher by name, which told Simone he was a regular despite his obvious wealth. "The usual booth, Mr. Bennett?" the older Italian man asked. "Yes, thanks, Antonio. And could we get a booster seat for the young lady?" As they settled in, Amara immediately began rearranging the table settings to her satisfaction, something that usually embarrassed Simone in restaurants. But Christopher watched with amusement, even helping her line up the salt and pepper shakers just right. "She has strong opinions about organization," Simone explained. "I can respect that. Order matters. Everything has to be just so or she gets upset. Sounds like she'd make a good executive someday." The casual way he said it, without condescension or forced positivity, made Simone relax for the first time all day. Over the next few weeks, Christopher found reasons to see Simone and Amara. It started innocently enough. A text thanking them for their kindness at graduation, then an invitation to a children's museum when he learned Amara loved dinosaurs. Simone was cautious at first. Her experience with Amara's father had taught her to be wary of men who seemed too good to be true. But Christopher's interest appeared genuine, focused not on impressing her but on bringing joy to her daughter. "He's nice, Mommy," Amara announced after their third outing together, this time to the aquarium. "He doesn't talk down to me like other grown-ups do." It was true. Christopher spoke to Amara like she was a person worth knowing, asking her opinions and listening to her answers. He never seemed impatient with her questions or embarrassed by her enthusiasm. During one of their conversations, while Amara was fascinated by the touch tank, Christopher had opened up about his accident. "I was supposed to get married that weekend," he said quietly. "Sarah and I were driving to a planning meeting with the caterer. A drunk driver ran a red light." "I'm so sorry," Simone said, understanding flooding through her. "Sarah died instantly. My best friend Michael was in the backseat. He didn't make it either. I was in a coma for 3 weeks and when I woke up, everything was different. That's a lot to lose at once. The physical therapy was the easy part. Learning to live with the guilt was harder." Simone had reached over and squeezed his hand, a gesture that felt natural despite how little time they'd known each other. It was during that same week that Christopher learned about Amara's medical situation. They were at a playground, Christopher watching from his wheelchair as Simone pushed Amara on the swings, when her daughter suddenly stopped and pressed her hand to her chest. "I need to rest," Amara said, unusual for a child who normally had endless energy. Simone was at her side immediately, checking her pulse, watching her color. Christopher noticed the practiced way she assessed her daughter, the worry that flickered across her features. "Is she okay?" he asked when they sat on a bench. "She has a heart condition," Simone explained quietly while Amara rested against her shoulder. "A valve that doesn't work properly. She needs surgery but what? Insurance will cover most of it but not everything. I'm saving up for the deductible and the time I'll need to take off work." Christopher felt something twist in his chest. This beautiful, kind woman was working herself to exhaustion to save her daughter's life while he sat on billions he couldn't spend fast enough. "How much do you need?" he asked. "Oh no," Simone said quickly. "I wasn't telling you that for money. I would never. I know you wouldn't, but I'm asking anyway. How much?" Simone named a figure that was less than Christopher spent on clothing in a month. The fact that this amount stood between Amara and the surgery she needed felt obscene. "Let me help," he said simply. "Christopher, no. I can't accept that kind of money from you." "Why not?" "Because it's not right. We barely know each other. I know that you and your daughter are the first people in 3 years to make me feel human again. I know that Amara asks about my day like it matters, and that you listen when I talk like my words have value. I know that spending time with your family is the highlight of my week." Simone stared at him, and Christopher could see the internal battle playing out across her face. "The money means nothing to me," he continued. "I have more than I could spend in several lifetimes. But giving it to help Amara means everything. I can't just take money from you, then consider it a loan. Pay me back when you can. That could take years. I'm not going anywhere." 2 days later, Simone found herself in the cardiac surgeon's office, holding a check that would cover not only Amara's surgery but also her recovery expenses and Simone's lost wages. Christopher had deposited it into her account despite her protests, along with a note that read, "Every child deserves the chance to run and play without pain. Let me give her that chance." Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, the pediatric cardiac surgeon, reviewed Amara's case files one more time. "The good news is that this is a relatively straightforward valve repair," she explained. "Children Amara's age typically recover quickly and go on to live completely normal lives. When can we schedule it? Simone asked, still barely believing this moment was happening. We can get her in next week if you're ready. Simone looked at Amara, who was coloring quietly in the corner, unaware that her life was about to change dramatically. We're ready. The night before the surgery, Christopher came to dinner at Simone's small apartment for the first time. He arrived with flowers for Simone and a stuffed elephant for Amara, along with several bags of groceries. I thought you might not feel like cooking, he explained. You really didn't need to do all this. I wanted to. Besides, I can't remember the last time I cooked for anyone. Simone's apartment was tiny compared to what Christopher was used to, but it felt like a home in ways his penthouse never had. Photos covered the refrigerator, Amara's artwork decorated the walls, and everything spoke of a life lived with love and intentionality. As they prepared dinner together, Simone found herself studying Christopher's profile. Somewhere along the way he'd stopped being the lonely stranger from graduation and had become... What exactly? A friend? Something more? Are you scared about tomorrow? He asked while Amara played in the living room. Terrified, Simone admitted. She's all I have. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Dr. Rodriguez is the best pediatric cardiac surgeon on the East Coast. I made sure of it. You researched her? I researched everyone. I wanted to make sure Amara had the absolute best care. The casual way he said it, as if personally investigating medical professionals was perfectly normal, reminded Simone of the vast differences in their worlds. Christopher could research doctors, demand the best specialists, and write checks that changed lives without thinking twice. She counted every dollar and worried about taking time off work. But when Amara called them both to see her latest drawing, a picture of the three of them at the aquarium, those differences seemed less important than the way Christopher's face softened when he looked at her daughter. This is beautiful, sweetheart, Christopher said, examining the crayon masterpiece seriously. Can I keep a copy for my office? You want to hang my picture in your office? Amara asked, eyes wide. I'd be honored to. That night, after Christopher left and Amara was asleep, Simone sat at her kitchen table trying to process everything that had happened. A month ago, she'd been a single mother struggling to save for her daughter's surgery, working double shifts and surviving on hope and determination. Now, that same daughter would receive life-saving surgery from the best doctor available, and it was all because of a man she'd met by accident. A man who seemed to see past her scrubs and exhaustion to something worth knowing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Christopher. Thank you for letting me be part of tomorrow. Whatever happens, know that meeting you both has changed my life. Simone stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for giving my daughter a future. But even as she typed the words, she knew he'd given them both something much more valuable than money. He'd given them hope. Amara's surgery took 4 hours. Christopher arrived at the hospital before dawn with coffee for Simone and spent the entire day in the waiting room, pacing when his wheelchair would allow, making calls to ensure everything possible was being done. When Dr. Rodriguez finally emerged with a smile, announcing the surgery had been a complete success, Christopher watched Simone collapse into tears of relief and felt his own eyes burn. She did beautifully, the surgeon reported. The valve repair went perfectly. She should make a full recovery with no restrictions on activity. During Amara's recovery, Christopher was there every day. He brought books, puzzles, and a tablet loaded with age-appropriate games. When Amara grew restless, he told stories about business meetings that sounded like fairy tales in his retelling. Once upon a time, he'd begin, there was a man who had to convince a dragon to share his gold with a village of people who needed homes. Simone found herself falling for both versions of Christopher, the successful businessman who could command boardrooms and the gentle man who could make her daughter laugh when she was scared. One evening, as Amara slept peacefully in her hospital bed, Simone and Christopher sat in the chairs beside her, talking quietly. Why are you doing all this? Simone asked. Really? You could help anyone, donate to any charity. Why us? Christopher was quiet for a long moment, watching Amara's steady breathing. The day I graduated, I was ready to give up, he said finally. Not in a dramatic way, just ready to accept that this was my life. Successful and empty. Then this little girl walked up to me and asked my name like it mattered. Like I mattered. You do matter. I hadn't felt that way in 3 years. You and Amara gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Purpose. Joy. The feeling that tomorrow might be better than today. Simone reached over and took his hand. You gave us hope. That's a fair trade. Their relationship deepened during Amara's recovery. Christopher worked from the hospital during the day, taking calls and video meetings from the family lounge. Simone marveled at watching him run a multi-billion-dollar company while simultaneously helping Amara with coloring books. The night before Amara was discharged, as they prepared to leave the hospital, she made an announcement that surprised them both. "Christopher should come live with us," she declared from her hospital bed. "Sweetheart," Simone started, "Christopher has his own home. But he's sad when he goes there. I can tell. He's only happy when he's with us." Out of the mouths of babes again. Christopher looked at Simone, and she saw the truth of Amara's observation in his eyes. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. "I am happiest with you both. Christopher. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. But I want you to know that what I feel for you both isn't gratitude or pity or any of the things you might worry about. It's love. Real, complicated, life-changing love." Simone felt her breath catch. She'd been trying not to name the feelings growing between them, afraid that acknowledging them would make the eventual ending hurt worse. "I love you too," she whispered. "But this is all so fast and I have to think about Amara." "I know. And I want you to think about her. Think about whether having someone who adores her, who would do anything to protect her and give her the best life possible, might be good for her." "What are you saying?" Christopher reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Simone's heart stopped. "I'm saying that I want to marry you. Both of you. I want to be Amara's father and your husband. I want to build a life together that's about more than just getting by." Simone stared at the box, her mind racing. "You don't have to answer now," Christopher said quickly. "Just think about it." But as Simone looked at this man who had transformed their lives, who had given her daughter health and hope and herself the first taste of real partnership she'd ever known, she realized she didn't need time to think. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, we'll build a life together. Yes to all of it." Christopher's smile was brighter than all the hospital lights combined. "Can you believe how far they've come from that lonely graduation day? What do you think their wedding will be like?" Subscribe to see this beautiful love story reach its conclusion, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments about what makes the perfect family. The engagement announcement brought unexpected challenges. Christopher's family, who had been notably absent from his life since the accident, suddenly reappeared with strong opinions about his choice of bride. His older brother Marcus arrived at Christopher's penthouse unannounced, bringing their mother's disapproval and their father's business concerns. "A nurse, Christopher? Really?" Marcus said, pacing the living room. "And she has a child. Do you have any idea what this looks like?" "It looks like I'm happy for the first time in 3 years," Christopher replied calmly. "She's after your money. It's obvious." "Actually, it's not. She tried to refuse help with her daughter's surgery. I had to convince her to accept it. That's just good strategy. Playing hard to get." Christopher felt anger rise in his chest, something he'd rarely experienced in business, but that came quickly when someone attacked his family. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? A beautiful woman appears right when you're vulnerable, befriends you, lets you pay for her daughter's medical bills, and suddenly you're engaged. Come on, Chris. You're smarter than this." The seeds of doubt, once planted, were hard to ignore. That evening, when Christopher joined Simone and Amara for dinner at their favorite restaurant, he found himself noticing things differently. The way Simone insisted on paying for her coffee. The way she carefully calculated the tip. The way she seemed grateful for everything he did. Was it genuine appreciation or careful manipulation? "You're quiet tonight," Simone observed as they waited for their food. "Just thinking about work." But Amara, with a child's intuition for mood, sensed the change immediately. "Are you sad again, Christopher?" she asked, reaching across the table to pat his hand. "No, sweetheart. Just tired." "When people say they're tired but they're really sad, they usually need hugs," Amara announced. "Mommy taught me that." Christopher looked at this little girl who had become so precious to him, then at Simone, who was watching him with concern, and felt his doubts waver. How could anything this pure be calculated? But over the next few days the doubts grew stronger. His family's words echoed in his mind. His business associates offered congratulations that felt more like condolences. Even his personal assistant mentioned how quickly the relationship had developed. The breaking point came when Christopher overheard Simone on the phone with her sister. "I know it seems fast," Simone was saying. "But Kiana, he's wonderful. He makes me feel like anything is possible." "Are you sure it's not just the money?" Her sister's voice came through the speaker. "Of course I'm sure. Yes, the financial security would be nice, but that's not why I'm marrying him. But it doesn't hurt, right? Amara could go to any college, you'd never have to worry about bills again." "It's not about the money," Simone repeated. but there was something in her voice that made Christopher's chest tight. That night, he called off their dinner plans, claiming work emergency. Then he sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights, wondering if he'd been a fool. When Simone arrived unannounced the next evening, he almost didn't answer the door. "What's wrong?" she asked the moment she saw his face. "You've been avoiding my calls." "Have I?" "Christopher, what's going on? Did I do something wrong?" He wanted to ask her directly, wanted to demand the truth about her feelings. But the words stuck in his throat. "Maybe we're moving too fast," he said instead. Simone stepped back as if he'd slapped her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe my family is right. Maybe this is all happening because you see an opportunity, not because you love me." The hurt that flashed across Simone's face was immediate and raw. "Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think. After everything we've shared, everything we've been through together, you think I'm some kind of gold digger? You wouldn't be the first woman to see my bank account before my heart." Simone was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady but cold. "You're right. We are moving too fast. Fast enough that I forgot you don't really know me at all." She turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I fell in love with the man who listened to my daughter talk about dinosaurs for an hour without getting bored. The man who learned to braid hair because Amara asked him to. The man who cried when she came through surgery safely. I never wanted your money, Christopher. I wanted you." She left the engagement ring on his coffee table and walked out. Christopher spent the next week in misery. His penthouse felt more empty than ever. His business meetings dragged. Food had no taste. Even his physical therapy sessions, usually a highlight of his week, felt pointless. His therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, noticed the change immediately. "What's going on, Christopher? You seem to have regressed." "I think I made a mistake," he said. "What kind of mistake?" Christopher found himself telling her everything. The doubts, his family's interference, the conversation he'd overheard, Simone's reaction to his accusations. "So you accused the woman you love of being a gold digger because your family planted doubt in your mind?" Dr. Kim summarized. "When you put it like that. How else should I put it? Christopher, what has this woman ever asked you for?" "Nothing. She tried to refuse the help with Amara's surgery. And yet you believed she was manipulating you for money? My family seems so sure." "Your family that abandoned you after your accident? That never visits or calls unless they want something. That's who you trusted over the woman who sits with you in hospitals and celebrates your achievements." Christopher felt like he'd been punched in the chest. "I've been an idiot." "Yes, you have. The question is what you're going to do about it." But when Christopher went to Simone's apartment, she wouldn't see him. When he called, she didn't answer. When he sent flowers, they were returned unopened. Finally, desperate, he went to the hospital where she worked. "She's not talking to you," Kiana informed him at the nurse's station. "And frankly, I don't blame her. Do you have any idea how much you hurt her?" "I know. I was wrong. I let other people's doubts become my own." Simone has spent her entire adult life proving she's not what people assume she is. Single mother, young, beautiful, working class. Everyone thinks they know her story. She thought you were different. I am different. I want to be. I love her. Then you need to prove it. And not with money or gifts or grand gestures. You need to prove you trust her, respect her, and believe in her worth beyond what she can give you. Christopher spent the next 2 weeks planning. Not a proposal or a surprise that would put Simone on the spot, but something that would show he truly understood what he'd done wrong and what she meant to him. He started by donating anonymously to the hospital's pediatric cardiac unit, specifically requesting that the donation create a fund for families who couldn't afford treatment, to be managed by the nursing staff who best understood patient needs. When Simone's supervisor mentioned the generous donation and asked if she wanted to help administer it, she accepted without knowing its source. Next, he arranged for his company to offer full scholarships to nursing school for single mothers, again anonymously, administered through a foundation that gave full credit to the nursing profession for the program's inspiration. Finally, he wrote a letter. Not asking for forgiveness or demanding a second chance, but taking full responsibility for his actions and explaining what he'd learned about himself, about love, and about what truly mattered. He gave the letter to Amara at school pickup, which Kiana had arranged. "Hi, Christopher," Amara said, throwing her arms around him. "I missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart. Can you give this to your mom for me? Are you going to marry her again?" "I hope so if she'll let me." "Good. She cries when she thinks I'm not looking." Christopher's heart broke a little more. "I'm sorry, Amara. I hurt your mom's feelings and I'm trying to make it better." Sometimes when I hurt people's feelings, I have to say sorry and mean it really hard. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. 2 days later, Simone called. The letter was beautiful, she said without preamble. Every word was true. I need to know this won't happen again. That the first time someone questions my motives, you won't doubt everything we've built. It won't. I promise you, Simone. I know who you are now. Not just what I hoped you were, but who you actually are. And that person is worth more than all the money in the world. Amara wants to see you. And what do you want? I want to try again. Slowly this time. With no doubt about why we're together. I'd like that too. Good. Because there's something you should know about those anonymous donations you've been making. Christopher's heart stopped. How did you? The foundation called for a reference check on you. Apparently they require board approval for donations over a certain amount, and they wanted to verify you were who you claimed to be. Simone, I wasn't trying to buy my way back. I know. That's why I said yes when you asked me to marry you the first time. And it's why I'm saying yes again now. 6 months later, Christopher Bennett married Simone Washington in the same chapel where his parents had wed 30 years earlier. But unlike their elaborate society wedding, this ceremony was intimate, focused on what mattered most. Amara served as the most important member of the wedding party, carrying the rings in a basket she'd decorated herself and wearing a dress that made her feel like a princess. She'd insisted on walking down the aisle first, explaining to anyone who would listen that she needed to make sure the church was ready for her new daddy. Christopher's family attended, somewhat stiffly, but his chosen family filled the front rows. Kiana served as Simone's maid of honor, Dr. Rodriguez and the nursing staff from the hospital came to celebrate, and even Antonio from the pizza place brought his family. But the most meaningful moment came during the ceremony itself, when Christopher had a surprise for his new family. Before we exchange vows, he said, turning to face Amara, I have something important to say. He shifted from his wheelchair to one knee, a movement that required significant effort but one he'd practiced for weeks with his physical therapist. Amara Washington, will you let me be your daddy? Not just in name but in all the ways that matter. Amara launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over. Yes. I already told everyone at school you were going to be my daddy. As Christopher struggled back into his wheelchair with Amara's help, there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. The vows they exchanged were simple but profound. Simone promised to love Christopher not despite his challenges but because of how he'd overcome them. Christopher promised to love and protect both his girls, to never let doubt overshadow trust, and to remember that the greatest wealth was the love of family. At the reception held in the hospital's community garden that Christopher had funded, Amara gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. I'm happy because now I have a mommy and a daddy, and Christopher is happy because he's not alone anymore, and mommy is happy because she doesn't have to worry about money for my doctor visits. But mostly we're all happy because we love each other, and that's the most important thing. As they danced their first dance as a family, Christopher holding Simone while Amara danced around their wheelchair, he felt a contentment he'd never known was possible. Later that evening, as they settled into their new home together, Christopher received the call he'd been waiting for. Mr. Bennett? Dr. Stevens, his neurologist, sounded excited. I have some remarkable news. The latest tests show significant nerve regeneration in your lower spine. It's unusual but not unheard of. With intensive therapy you might regain some sensation, possibly even limited mobility. Christopher looked at Simone, who was tucking Amara into bed, and at the little girl who had taught him that family came in many forms. That's wonderful news, doctor. When can we start? But even as he planned for the possibility of physical recovery, Christopher knew he'd already experienced the most important healing. He'd gone from a man who had everything but felt empty to a man who understood that love was the only currency that truly mattered. 6 months later, as he took his first assisted steps at physical therapy, with Simone and Amara cheering him on, Christopher Bennett realized that sometimes the greatest miracles came not from what we could do with our bodies, but from what we could do with our hearts. The lonely billionaire who had sat surrounded by empty chairs at graduation was gone, replaced by a husband and father who understood that the greatest success wasn't measured in dollars, but in the depth of love shared with the people who mattered most. And as Amara ran to hug him after his first few steps, declaring him the best daddy in the whole world, Christopher knew that his real graduation day hadn't been at Harvard. It had been the day a little girl and her mother taught him what it meant to truly live.